Welcome back to the Adam Allen Bookman podcast. This is episode 3. We're discussing Ian Wright and his life in football. We enjoyed this one so much. There's so much to get in that this episode has been cleaved into 2 separate episodes. It was released in 2016 when Ian Wright was 52 years old. Jolly.
Are you sure about this? So I think we've read the wrong books, Ed. I read Mr. Wright, The Explosive Autobiography of Ian Wright, published by HarperCollins, Willow, on the 1st of January 1997. I'm just joking. I'm just joking.
Nice.
Anyway, sorry, that was easy enough, wasn't it?
That's funny. Don't leave this in your knob. All right then, okay. All right then. Well, this is a very enjoyable book, really a lovely book, very well written, and dedicated to Mr. Higdon, who we'll come on to later.
Ian Wright, A Life in Football, as you said, published in September 2016. It was described by the Sunday Post as a warm and engaging read. Exciting. In terms of reviews, I got 4.05 on Goodreads, and I got 4.4 on Amazon.
Well, for my tuppence, I'd say as football books go, this is definitely the better side of things. It's an honest book, I think. He confronts his own shortcomings. It's genuinely quite interesting. His childhood is actually genuinely very interesting, whereas normally these are things I want to skim over the most in a football autobiography. Yeah, he comes across as very, very generous to people with whom he's grown up, and to anyone who's ever given him help, he seems not to have forgotten at all. Yeah, genuinely comes across really well, without trying to be too self-aggrandizing. He's kind and he's generous and very willing to admit his faults.
Yeah, I think he's got a real humility, and I think it came from the very, very start of the book. Just immediately, what struck me was that Wright talks about other people a lot. Like Wright started by talking about Wenger and Vieira, for example, and seeing them in this period of time when obviously Arsenal were on the cusp of this, what proved to be wildly successful change in era, but just his initial views of them. And I think he described, it was a scene in the dressing room. They had come to, just to be around the game. I think it was a European game maybe. And he described the scene in the dressing room as being like a chimps party. So I think from the start, it seemed like it might be a bit of fun. And also, I think there's a warmth to Wright that is not, doesn't seem put on or contrived or fake or anything. I think it's really there. He's a nice guy. And I felt like I was rooting for him.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you've seen anything to do with Ian Wright on the media, I mean, it's just his honesty and his warmth comes through. He's very progressive. He's a big advocate for women's soccer. Yeah, the kid's a good guy. I mean, he is a good guy. And I guess I went into this book with that in my head, but that's only compounded. I mean, he just comes across as someone who wants to learn, someone who wants to improve himself, someone who wants to have a laugh. He never takes himself too seriously. It's never particularly preachy. It's just the man just, I don't know, he lives life right.
Yeah.
That was no pun intended.
Yeah. I had, just when I was reading it, I listened to a few interviews and whatever, read a little bits and bobs around about him as well. And I heard one interview where he was saying when he was initially on BBC on Match of the Day, they used to kind of like put him on as kind of the Bants guy at the end, and I think that kind of wore on him eventually. But he said that Alan Hansen used to steal his lines. He'd say something to Hansen in the break, and then whoever it was, Des Lynam would go to Hansen first. And Hansen would take Wright's line, and then it would go to Wright, and he'd be like, "Oh, he just have something lame and jokey to say," which was pretty nice. Do you want to, maybe it would be sensible to give the kind of rough contours of the book? Do you want to?
It starts off with meeting Arsene Wenger, then his time at Arsenal through George Graham and Rioch, and then obviously Wenger. Part 2 is titled An Incredible Journey. That's from his childhood, his unhappy childhood, to eventually making it as a soccer player. Part 3, Life Goes On. That's his life after football, where I think we can agree with some highs and lows. And then the last part is Ian Wright's life now, or at least as it was in 2016. He very, very generously, the very last chapter is devoted to David Rocastle, who was a former teammate who died very young and was a fabulous football player, a little bit before my time, but someone I've always heard of, spoke of as a really, truly great player. Anyway, but yeah, that's a testament to Wrighty, but that's how he finished his book, with a kind word about someone else.
Yeah, exactly. I think there's a certain classiness to Ian Wright. And like I said, maybe I think maybe to some extent I had him in my head as kind of a fancy kind of fella. Maybe didn't give him full credit. I think he's a much deeper thinker than I maybe considered. He's always come across as a warm fella, but he goes into themes in this book that I think are really, really interesting. Like just obviously race being a big factor, race as a black footballer in England in the 70s, 80s, and so on. Growing up, very interesting. But yeah, there was quite a bit of intellectual fodder in there, really, maybe that I didn't fully expect.
No, I genuinely learned some things from this book. I genuinely did. I looked at new aspects. Certainly, his life growing up in London was absolutely fascinating. Certainly from my perspective, I'm English. I grew up 200 miles away. I mean, obviously not in London, but from the confines of my little middle-class white life, this is a world I don't recognise at all, which he gave me an introduction to, which genuinely was absolutely fascinating. The music and the people he used to hang around with growing up in London. It was genuinely, truly interesting, and not something I wanted to skip over at all, as I normally would do in a football's autobiography. Normally I just want to give me the goals, give me the trophies, but this was not the case. It really was a real insight into his life and a life as a black man growing up in London in the 70s and 80s.
Would you like some Ian Wright facts? Would you like some facts?
Yeah, I would.
About
I would.
The man himself. He's known for his speed, agility, finishing, and aggression. Did you know that?
Yeah, that's how I would characterise him.
Yes? Okay. He played 581 league games, scoring 287 goals for 7 clubs in Scotland and England. He had 33 caps for England, scoring 9 international goals. And yeah, I'd like to hear your thoughts about his England career in a minute, actually. At Arsenal, he won the Premier League, the FA Cup, the UEFA Cup Winners' Cup. I remember that game. That was when Alan Smith scored, right? The League Cup, and he won the Premier League Golden Boot. Would you have known what year that was? Do you know what year it was?
92, 93?
I think it was 92, yeah. His first season at Arsenal. 185 goals for Arsenal, 117 for Palace. It's not a bad career by anyone's standards. And of course, quite famously, Wright is another player who came to it much later. He didn't become a professional until he was 22, and he was a professional for 15 years.
I mean, I think he talks about this at length, but he made an unprecedented step up in terms of football in a way that, he can't think of anyone else who had a comparable step up. He went from the lower leagues, proper lower leagues, straight to the second division in England, and within 2 or 3 years into the Premier League and the England team. Yeah, astonishing. It's genuinely an astonishing story, and it's a testament to his drive and determination and skill.
And agility, finishing, and aggression, not to mention those.
That's what I was going to say.
Those characteristics.
All right, so part 1, Ivory High. This focuses a lot on the demise of George Graham and the rise of Wenger. Do you remember that at the time, Johnny, the George Graham Bung scandal?
Yeah, as in I remember being in the news and uh, it being vaguely about bribery, I suppose. Yeah, I think I do. Yeah, no, I definitely do. Yeah. Do you remember the like? Did you get a lot of detail about it at the time? Did he actually get prosecuted, then, Graham?
Oh, criminally prosecuted? I don't know about that. I don't think so. I mean, he came back, didn't he? He did come back to football.
Oh yeah, of course. Sure, Wright talks about him becoming Spurs manager, which was
Yeah, he lost a lot of respect for him that day, didn't he? Like, I mean, he's trying to say like, but he lost a good deal of respect for him there.
yeah. And one thing that struck me about Wright is, and it seems almost kind of like old fashioned, is like this idea of clubs having a very definitive identity, and Arsenal having been, Arsenal in particular. But he talks about it with West Ham as well. But like Arsenal, the Arsenal way, you do things right. They don't sack managers. He keeps going on about this kind of stuff. So like this, he's very tied up in Arsenal, which is not a big surprise given that he's a club legend and all the rest of it. But yeah, he was sickened by him going to Spurs, wasn't he?
He really was. I mean, you just don't do that. No, it really comes across how much he is a fan, right? I mean, he is a fan. I mean, he'll be critical, but yeah, I mean, he refers to them as magnificent. Like, well, this is why we are magnificent at some point in the book, and I just thought that's the way I talk about my team. Like, and it's just totally endearing. Like, very very sweet.
Yeah, there is yeah. I suppose at times he does have a kind of a kind of a childlike effusiveness about these things, which, as you say, was quite charming. But okay, Graham, what he had done essentially was he was taking money for transfers. Yes,
Yes.
and
Now,
were there particular players? Do you remember, or was everyone?
I believe it was John Jensen was a player in particular that it
Mm,
was a reason that it refers to that as like, well, John Jensen getting. So yeah, I think it's interesting how the players turned against him
mm.
um, after he'd stolen. I mean, he was over $400,000, but £400,000, excuse me. But I think what's very interesting is that they're resentful because he was so tight with their contracts.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
he would really try to squeeze them. Now, as the manager rather than the money man, why would he do that, Johnny? I think that's interesting.
Yeah, well, maybe it's a sign of the times as well when managers controlled more around the they obviously talk about this, the transition from to the Peps from the Ferguson era, I guess, when Ferguson had control over signings and all the rest of it. So maybe that's it. Maybe he did have some like budgetary responsibilities, but also I think this is true of managers in life in general. If there's one thing that people don't like, it is hypocrisy, right? Like,
Absolutely.
yeah, and if he's nickel and diming those guys, and then he's on the other hand, he's like pocketing whatever it is, whatever it might have been, I guess 30, 40, 50 grand at the time. It's like, yeah, fuck this guy. Um,
Yeah, because there's a point. I mean, it says here, Mickey Thomas, when he went from Arsenal to Liverpool, I remember that after he'd scored the goal which lost Liverpool the title. He said that he'd been on 3 or 4 times the wages he was at Arsenal, at Liverpool. 3 or 4 times. I found that to be astonishing.
yeah, that
And it's
is,
testament to how much people must have loved Arsenal. But he keeps saying he wasn't there for the money. He wanted to play for the Arsenal. He wanted to play, but he wasn't interested in the money.
yeah, and
Again,
he said he got £700 more a week to play for Arsenal compared to Palace, which I guess in terms of the step up, I guess he probably expected a bit more. And again, an endearing Ian Wright kind of anecdote is like he was in the car worried about what he's going to tell his wife that he's only going back with 700 quid more. Thought that was quite sweet. Um, yeah, Graham, like what were your memories of Graham? Obviously, he's kind of a taciturn character, isn't he? Or was?
well, that's right. I mean, he was very famous. I mean, the Arsenal offside trap. I mean, that's what he was. He was a defensive coach. 1-0 to the Arsenal. It was very, very famous at the time. And remember in the Full Monty, there
Yeah.
was a whole skit about Arsenal and their defensive organisation. So Yeah, that's how I remember him, as kind of a negative football coach, somebody who wasn't trying to play football particularly, but clearly very, very effective.
Yeah, you know what, Wright, I think does well in the book generally, and certainly with Graham, he does criticize him, as you say. He goes at him for his involvement in this bung stuff. He criticizes his approach to football, and obviously, as we mentioned, for the Spurs thing. But he also talks about how he was a really charismatic fellow at times, who could really like build you up in terms of your confidence. And I think, right, there's this throughout the book. He gives more than one side of an individual. And at times he's really, really quite cutting about people that he then goes on to say that he really has huge affection for. So I wonder, was there much of a fallout like for him in terms of the book?
No, well, that's it. I mean, he does. He gives a full dressing down of George Graham, what he did. But then I was just astonished to read that the man who had the most impact on my football career was George Graham. He was
Yeah,
best because of how he motivated me at a time when I need motivating exactly that way. Now, considering he starts the story with meeting Wenger, and then there's a whole lot of thing about how Wenger changed his life. In the end, he said George Graham was the manager who had the most impact, not Steve Coppell, who took him into professional football, not Wenger, who restarted the whole game in England. It was George Graham. So, yeah, that's right. I mean, he is both sides, but ultimately he's very, very respectful to him. Just disappointed he went to Spurs.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, whatever he says about Graham, the Rioch stuff was fun, wasn't it? Bruce Rioch stuff.
The Bruce Riot stuff is lovely. I mean, that is an absolutely astonishing little anecdote, but he just absolutely unnecessary as well, completely and utterly unnecessary. It has no relevance to the book at all. Ian Wright just wants you to know that at some point in his football career, Bruce Rioch knocked out a 17-year-old kid and kicked his head
In training, right?
in training.
But yeah,
He
like
doesn't need that for the book. He just wants to paint a picture of the man.
he really doesn't
I
like
think
Rioch. So
he really does.
there's no question of painting, two sides to Rioch. So Rioch was from this military background. His father was a drill sergeant or something like that, and that's what Rioch was like. Has them running up and down hills, singing, doing chants about never giving up, that kind of stuff. Like really, really just seems out of date, especially later when we're looking at Wenger and the likes of Bergkamp coming in. But yeah, it was funny to hear him talking about just to carry on in training games, and how Rioch just trying to be like an actual player in a training games, like with top quality players, and just essentially just fouling them and kicking them all the time. And then right one day just laid him out in a training match. That was really enjoyable. And so the whole ground, or whatever, the training pitch, everybody's just in this stunned silence for a minute as they try to figure out what Rioch is going to do after he's been laid out by Wright. But he just kind of gets up and whatever, gets on with it, because I guess he's a manly guy.
Yeah, I think this is another thing which really turned him against Rioch is it didn't get any better when he stopped a training session once to tell me, in front of everybody, what I could learn from watching the runs made by John McGinley, the striker when he was at Bolton. He'd do that to others too. Use Bolton players as examples of what they should be doing. Will you get that right? It's like, look at these tangibly worse players.
And just on the topic, Al, of like putting in unnecessary digs, he also Wright goes out of his way to banish that kind of, it's kind of a trivia question, isn't it? Who signed Dennis Bergkamp?
That's what I've got written down here. That's, for me, was Bruce Rioch's only legacy at Arsenal, was like, well, he did bring in Dennis Bergkamp. No.
Oh, no.
He didn't. That was the wonderful, my God, David Dean. How much does Ian Wright love David Dean?
Yeah,
But yeah, it was absolutely not Rioch bringing him in. Absolutely not. It was David Dean who signed Dennis Bergkamp and gave him a wonderful present.
actually, like I said, he does stick the boot in on a few people, but Rioch gets it as bad as anyone, and maybe the person he kind of unreservedly kind of seems to dislike the most.
Just as far going back a little bit, I just wanted to leave this out. A lot of the time, going back to the first chapter, he talks about how it was ready for Graham to go, and it was because of the players he started to bring in. Now, this comes up a few times, and this is what Ian Wright says. I don't mean to be disrespectful. Stop. At this point, yes, he does mean to be disrespectful. At this point, he's going to tell you, and this crops up again and again. I don't mean to be disrespectful, but the fans all know who I'm talking about. The bad players, Chris Kiwomya, Glenn Helder, Chris, I love this. My dear friend, Eddie McGoldrick, Val Liderson. Yeah, he's very dear friend who he name checks as being not good enough to play alongside him and not good enough for the Arsenal. I really got a kick out of that. Like, my dear friend.
He goes back to Chris Kiwomya later, and like I say, there's things in this book that just never would have occurred to me. But Wright, as a black Londoner, found it really entertaining when he met black Englishmen from the north of England, which I thought was really funny, and Chris Kiwomya used to call people petal. He's from Huddersfield, I think. And apparently
flower.
And then Wright says that Chris Kiwomya insisted that he used to clean up with the women when he used to call them flower and petal and all the rest of it.
He also talks about, at one point, I think Carlton Palmer wearing his black man northern clothes. I don't even know what they are. What does that mean? I only know he's wearing his black man northern clothes. Oh, I don't know what that means, but I like it. I like it, Righty.
Do you know what Chris Kiwomya does now for a living?
Well, not.
It's in football, by the way, so it's not too much of a stretch. Chris Kiwomya is currently the manager of the British Virgin Islands national football team. And obviously that's obscure enough. British Islands, I learned, is not even a country. It's a British overseas territory. So how many countries are ranked in the world FIFA men's football, do you reckon?
205?
Not too bad. 211. And the British Virgin Islands are 209. Okay, where were we? Going back to...
I just want to just pop back to another interesting and funny little aside. He talks about, footballers still like playing football, and he just drops this line in. I still play five-a-side with my Albanian mates. The people on both teams love it. Everybody gets a lift, and for me, it's brilliant to talk to your team while you're playing. His Albanian mates? He doesn't explain that at all. It just, his Albanian mates. It's like, yeah, the only time Wrighty plays football now is with his Albanian mates. Is it taken? He has a very special set of skills, his Albanians are particularly enamoured with. Just the Albanians he plays with now. Never explains it, just plays with his Albanian mates. Anyway, good for him.
Yeah, that is funny. But okay, so out goes Rioch, but perhaps a bigger shock was the fellow who arrived.
I remember that headline, Arsene Who. I can remember just being like, his name's like Arsenal. I just couldn't really get past that. So
incredible, roll of the dice, really, from visionary chairman. I think
that's it. He literally writes it. David Dean is a visionary. That very word himself. But I mean, he's impressive. Plucked him from Monaco, Grand Passate in Japan. I mean, it was a big shout.
Yeah, it was a big shout, like getting Christian Gross in at Spurs. I guess he spawned a lot of kind of tribute acts afterwards, didn't he? That didn't go quite as well. He
certainly did.
But
another player, who helped to move that on as much, which is chapter 3, is Dennis Bergkamp, who was, just to reiterate, a David Dean signing. Fuck all to do with Bruce Rioch. It would be fair to say that Wrighty really, really, really loves Dennis Bergkamp. He has a good deal of time for him. Indeed, there is one quote which really stuck with me. I thought was absolute gold. I don't know anybody who loves their wife and their family more than him. I don't think it's possible for somebody to love their missus more than he loves Henrietta. I looked up to Dennis in such a way that I would have asked myself, do you love your missus enough? And even if that marriage wasn't working, then I would have ended it in a more proper, more dignified and amicable way. Yeah, what he's saying there is, if he'd known Dennis Bergkamp earlier, he would have ended his previous marriage in a more respectable way. I mean, I don't know about that. That seems to me a stretch. But fair enough.
Yeah,
he also told off Wrighty for drinking a cup of tea. So, well, that's just not cricket.
What was funny was he said that, and this is actually really sweet. He talks about he roomed with Bergkamp. And Bergkamp had this, massive impact on them in terms of professionalism and getting ready and all the rest of it. So, like you say, having to go with him for drinking a cup of tea, that kind of thing. But he said that when they started rooming together, Bergkamp comes out of the bathroom one night wearing pajamas, and Wright is like, "What the fuck?" He thinks this is so funny. And then a few days later, because Wright is so enamored with Bergkamp, Wright shows up in pajamas.
If it's good enough for him, it's good enough for me. He gets his own pajamas. That is absolutely lovely, isn't it? Absolutely delightful. Look, Dennis, I've got some pajamas as well. It's adorable. Absolutely adorable.
Yeah.
Maybe. I mean, anecdotally, can I just say, I saw Ian Wright and Dennis Bergkamp playing together against my team, and they were terrifying. Absolutely. I remember it at the time, terrifying. Right, he did these little arced runs that was so smart. Yeah, it was like nothing I'd ever seen watching my team. Watching those two play together was, as an opposing fan, absolutely terrifying.
Yeah, and that's nice. I think when in these books, footballers kind of explain why playing with such and such a player is different than playing with anyone they played with before is interesting. And he would say that Bergkamp would pass you the ball in a way that it would make up your mind for you. The ball would spin into you in a certain way, and it's okay, well, this is the way to hit the shot. It's that's really remarkable to think that fellas have that level of precision and can think. It's 360-degree thinking or whatever. I don't know. It's pretty fun, and I think maybe often these books don't get into that because maybe footballers think that we're, I guess, ultimately all idiots and
couldn't possibly understand the level of well, that's it. That stayed with me. Yeah, that's it. He passed the ball so whereby you could only pass it back to him, which gave him an extra set. Yeah, I really thought that was interesting, and that's the next level of football that he's talking about, which he hadn't experienced before, that a player like that would bring in.
Wright does that a bit in this book. Later on, when he talks about talking to Seaman and Bob Wilson about being a student of football and how he studied to improve being a striker and a finisher in particular. I thought all that stuff was great. I'd happily read that stuff all day.
Yep, it was genuinely interesting. It was pretty dry subject matter, but delivered in a way that was actually very insightful and very interesting. And even for a footballing nobody such as himself, I could understand. Yeah, and it only went to burnish Bergkamp's reputation in my eyes. I mean, you could always see he's a good player, but he'd make everyone else 20 or 30% better. That's what he said, and I think that's possibly true. Just one more little note here is he managed to throw in that fucking Igor Stepanov's anecdote. If there is a football anecdote I have heard more than that fucking Igor Stepanov's anecdote, I'm not even going to retell it here. My God. I've heard that in about 4 different football autobiographies and about every single football journalist that's ever been on a podcast. My God.
Oh, really?
I mean, had you not heard that part? Had you not heard that anecdote before?
Don't think so.
Oh, it's a funny anecdote. Well, it's worth reading out there. He loved winding up Martin Keown. They all apparently like to bully Martin Keown. And
this is Bergkamp, right?
Yeah, this is Bergkamp. And I think we can all understand that, right? Just look at Keown's face. There was a time when we were all watching a game in which Igor Stepanovs was playing for Skonto Riga, and Ray Parler and Dennis decided to wind Martin Keown up. Stepanovs was terrible, but they sat there talking completely seriously about how brilliant he was. They were saying he was exactly the player our defence needed, and Martin was sitting behind them fuming. I'm sure if it had just been Ray Parler, nobody would have taken any notice, but because Dennis was part of it, suddenly became believable. The problem was that Arsene Wenger was listening too, and he only went and bought Stepanovs. It's funny, isn't it? But yeah, 2 lads just talking about a player, and Wenger's listening, going, "Ooh, maybe he is good."
When Wright is talking about what a kind of a revolution it was that Wenger brought, and he's saying that he went for this no-name French guy when he could have hired Terry Venables or Jerry Francis. Jerry Francis, like he
Gary
wasn't.
Francis was right there. He was right there. You could take him right now, like mullet and all.
Yeah, yeah. Anyway, he kind of talks about like in terms of the timeline, as you said, it kind of goes backwards. It's like memento. Um, so I don't know. Are we done with Arsenal? Do we want to talk about Arsenal a bit more?
There's another nice anecdote, which I just think is lovely. Once Wenger caught me on rollerblades in Highbury's marble halls. I was just doing it for a laugh, but he was absolutely dumbfounded. A man of his intelligence just couldn't compute why a professional footballer, an experienced one at that, at Arsenal, would be on rollerblades on a marble floor. Well, good question. And a 33-year-old, he has to be at least 33 by this point,
Yeah,
arsing around on his rollerblades. It does sound fun, doesn't it? It sounds like they're having a lovely old time.
yeah. It does sound like they're having a nice time. To be fair, yeah. But yeah, like so, Wenger comes and he has, I suppose, an Indian summer, really, doesn't he? I think he was 33 when Wenger arrived, and then he won the double, and of course he had that very iconic moment in which he scored the 178 and 179 goal in the same match, ripping off his shirt in a fairly charming kind of like scooping himself, doing it for the 178 goal when he's wearing a shirt that says 179 just did it. Very nice.
What I felt about Arsene Wenger's time, once I finished at Arsenal and went to different clubs, was that I had left NASA. The supplements, the training regime, the diet, the stretching, the warming down, the preparation are commonplace among Premiership sides now, but in '96 it was unheard of. So he left NASA and he went to Harry Redknapp's. He went to Harry Redknapp's West Ham. So if Arsenal were NASA, what was Harry Redknapp's West Ham like? The North Korean Space Agency, some kids with a bottle rocket.
Yeah, and I enjoyed that stuff about Redknapp. That Redknapp is, I guess he's a political animal ultimately, and he'll be all about you when you arrive, saying things in the press. I can't believe they let him go, la la la, and then he just blank you in the corridor. He sounds like a bit odd, Harry.
Yeah, he doesn't sound a bit. No, but he comes across very badly here. I think, as he says, he's just got no time for him now.
Yeah, well, he more or less accuses Wright of faking injury, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I'm sure that was offensive to him.
Yeah, I think, if there's one thing that makes footballers angry is accurate or otherwise allegations of them faking injury. What I thought was nice was how he was saying that like keepers will shout at their defenders when they've fucked up, just so it looks like it's somebody else's fault. And I kind of always figured that was the case, but what I didn't realize is that strikers never really show their disappointment, even though they've missed the gilt-edged opportunity or whatever, and they're never like head and hands or whatever. Have you noticed that?
No, that's right. And yeah, well, it is a sign of weakness, isn't it? You're going to get the next one, right? That's got to be the mentality. If that one got away, you'll get the next one. Put it behind you. It's gone.
I think the thing that a lot of footballers struggle with most is, they're waning when their powers begin to wane. And I thought that anecdote of him, being sold by Arsenal was pretty interesting and pretty brutal, bearing in mind that we're talking about visionary David Dein and the Jesus-like Arsene Wenger, who came over to see him in France in 1998 during the World Cup, and essentially brought him into a room, sat him down, said, "It's game over, man. We're moving on without you." And then he was kind of shunted into the next room where I think his name is Ian Story or Peter Story, the West Ham chairman at the time was there. So the whole thing happens really when Wright's, I guess, blood is pounding in his ears or whatever, his heart is running a million miles. That's brutal.
It was. He was ambushed. He was ambushed there, and he didn't even time to think about it. He said it was all over before he even knew. But yes, he'd lost his true love. Like that was it for him. Yeah, it was all downhill from there. Obviously, I mean, he only lasted 2 more years in football, right? After that.
In terms of the England stuff, so you're an England fan. He played 33 times and scored 9 goals. What is, how was he perceived that by England fans at the time? And like in terms of should he have played more? And then in terms of like, was there always a clamour for him to play? And was he kind of a fella held in a lot of affection?
Well, that's one. I mean, at the time, there's a point about Graham Taylor leaving him out of a 92 squad. Now, I looked at the players he did take in the 92 squad, and one of them was Nigel Clough. So I would imagine, and that was certainly post Nigel Clough being at his peak. So he must have felt very hard done by there. By the
Yeah,
time 96 comes around, he was not such a significant figure. But then at that time, England really did have an absolute phalanx of quality strikers. We had Robbie Fowler, Ferdinand, Shearer, Collymore.
yeah.
There's more, but yeah, there was a lot back then. So I didn't feel it so acutely. But 92, he must have felt absolutely robbed.
I don't know. Obviously, Graham Taylor is kind of a widely lampooned figure, maybe a widely forgotten figure at this stage, but for a long time he was quite a figure of fun. But yeah, Wright didn't have much time for boring old Taylor.
No, he gives him quite the dressing down at one point, although he say he regrets that now and has since subsequently worked with Graham Taylor. I believe Graham Taylor is meant to be, was meant to be a very, very nice man.
He had, yeah, kind of a series of managers. It seems Venables. He doesn't go into a lot of detail about Venables, but he thought because Venables had shown an interest in signing him for Spurs before he went to Arsenal, so he thought maybe he would get a chance there. But Venables is kind of like you say. I suppose Shearer came along, but the thing that seems to have upset Wright about that period was just that he wasn't even on the bench. And he said that it was his destiny, to score, to come on and score a chance in the semi-final against Germany in 1996. Do you remember this particular chance that he's talking about?
I mean, do I fucking remember that chance, Johnny? Yes, of course I remember that chance. Yes, I do. I very much remember the chance. If Gaza had just got longer studs on, it would have been, yeah, I do remember that chance very much. But this is one of his hypotheticals, and we'll come back to that. He says that a few times. If things had gone a little bit differently, I can assure you this would have happened for sure.
He really did fancy Huddle, and I don't know to what extent footballers their respect and esteem. To what extent is it just tied to how much of a crack they gave different players? So Huddle did, even though Wright was later in his career, Huddle is the only one who really seemed to give him a shake. And he says that Huddle was the best of all of those guys, and had England had the 96 squad in 98, they would have won the World Cup. Discuss.
Yeah, maybe Darren Anderton, World Cup champion. Like,
just to rewind, right to the very beginning. Again, Wright is such a charming guy, and he talks about, and this is where I probably can't resist making a Vardy comparison, because Vardy was going to shy off on his first England call-up. Wright, on the other hand, described wearing the kit around his bedroom and just looking at himself in the mirror. Oh, that's nice.
He's just lovely, isn't he? He's just lovely. He's what you want a footballer to be. He's one of us. He's a fan.
Did this book change your opinion of Mark Viduka?
Yeah, it did. Just fuck off. I'm not doing it. Yeah, I thought that was really good. Although, obviously, from a football manager point of view, that's absolutely horrendous, isn't it?
Yeah, so that is, so to explain, and he's his third club after Arsenal. He went West Ham, Forest, and Celtic, but he played in the very famous 3-1 loss to Inverness Caledonian Thistle, which is immortalized in the headline. Super Cali go ballistic, Celtic are atrocious. But at halftime, they were losing. I think maybe they were losing 2-0 at halftime. They lost 3-1, and Mark Viduka just refused to go out. And Wright says that's the only time in his professional career. Actually, he doesn't even specify professional career. The only time he's seen somebody refuse to play for their team.
Also, just very quickly, talking of players that were pricks. When he first got with the England squad. Steve McMahon.
Go on. Sorry. Yeah. This, I love this stuff. Go on.
This is a nice anecdote. So Steve McMahon was a prick. As soon as he turned up to the England training squad, Steve McMahon was just being horrible to him. But he got his own back, which was a lovely way. Apparently, he went in for a tackle with Steve McMahon, where he caught him.
Years later, right?
Years later, after he'd made his first England training squad of misery, he got his stud and he slit his penis, apparently, all the way down. He slit his penis. And Steve McMahon said from that point onwards, whenever he got a boner, it would hurt and he'd think about Ian Wright's face. Oh, that's lovely, isn't it? So you got it back, like every time I'm aroused, I think of Ian Wright slitting my penis.
that is top quality stuff. It was interesting when he went from West Ham to Forest, and he said that Forest was progressive because it was under Platt, and Platt had played for Wenger, and he had spent a lot of time in Italy and was an Italian speaker, apparently. So he was progressive enough in terms of his methods. But he didn't like Celtic, which is funny because I remember reading Di Canio saying how he loved being at Celtic in the atmosphere, this kind of like, I guess Di Canio he's known for, isn't he kind of an ultra kind of character? But
he's a fascist, pure and fascist.
Like Wright had no truck with this carry on. He said it wasn't like football.
I think Ian, he just doesn't understand hatred like that. That's how I read it like that. He doesn't have that hatred in his heart, and he can't understand it from anyone else, and he doesn't admire it.
Yeah.
No, he really, really hated being at Celtic. And generally when you read people about players, they talk warmly about that, but not Wrighty, although that might have been a particularly bad time to be at Celtic as well.
But then he goes full on Robbie Keane when he talks about Millwall, saying it's the first club they fell in love with, which is obviously fine for any player to say, unless they've already said it in the same book about another team. And he said
really loves West Ham, really loves Millwall, and he really loves Arsenal.
Yeah, well, like the Arsenal thing came later, that's fine. But he says both about Millwall and West Ham that they're the first club that he fell in love with. He says he always expected to finish his career at Millwall, but he finished at Burnley. And there's not really much to say there, is there?
Well, just one thing. He refers to Stan Ternent as being a very handsome northerner, and that just clicked in my brain. I was like, is he? And I just had to quickly Google it. And I do not disremember what Stan Ternent looks like. I think, again, it's a very, very kind case of Ian Wright being very generous in his assessment of people. Very handsome, Stan Ternent.
That's kind of the first half of the book. The book is divided.
Yeah, perfect.
Part 1, part 2. And if he'd finished the book there, I think I would have been satisfied enough. That was a nice read. But like you said, the stuff about footballers' childhoods is often not that interesting, but this was very interesting.